They say the truth will set you free, but sometimes it just sets everything on fire. You know that feeling when something's been nagging at you for years, but you can't quite put your finger on what it is? That's how I felt about my relationship with my wife Melissa and our son Connor. Don't get me wrong, I loved that boy more than life itself. I'd been his dad since day one, changed his diapers, taught him to ride a bike, helped with homework, the whole 9 yards. There were always these little moments that made me wonder. Connor had these bright green eyes that seemed to come from nowhere. Neither Melissa nor I had green eyes. When I'd mention it, she'd just laugh it off, saying genetics were weird like that. Her grandmother supposedly had green eyes, though I'd never seen a photo. There were other things to his facial structure, the way he carried himself, even some of his mannerisms that reminded me of, well, someone else. For 10 years I pushed these thoughts down. I was being paranoid, right? Melissa and I had been together since college. We'd gotten married right after graduation, and Connor was born about a year and a half later. The timeline made sense. Everything made sense except for this persistent feeling in my gut that something wasn't adding up. The breaking point came last spring when Connor needed surgery to remove his appendix. It was routine, but the hospital required updated insurance paperwork, including family medical history. The doctor casually mentioned that Connor's blood type was AB negative, which he noted was pretty rare. I'm O positive, and I knew Melissa was A positive from when she donated blood in college. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about high school biology class and those Punnett squares we had to fill out. I wasn't a scientist, but I remembered enough to know that 2 parents with A and O blood types couldn't produce an AB child. It's genetically impossible. I spent the next week in a haze. Going through the motions at work, coming home and trying to act normal around Connor and Melissa. But inside I was falling apart. I needed to know the truth, even though part of me was terrified of what I might find. I ordered a paternity test kit online, one of those discreet ones that you can do at home. When it arrived, I waited until Melissa went to her book club meeting one Thursday evening. Connor was in his room doing homework, and I felt like the worst father in the world as I asked him if I could swab his cheek for a science project I was helping a colleague with at work. He didn't question it. Why would he? I was his dad, and he trusted me completely. That trust felt like a knife in my chest as I sealed the samples and sent them off to the lab. The waiting period was torture. 2 weeks of pretending everything was normal while my world potentially crumbled around me. I found myself studying Connor's face at dinner, looking for similarities I'd never noticed before. I watched Melissa for signs of guilt or nervousness, but she seemed completely normal, happy even. The results came back on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at work when the email notification popped up on my phone. My hands were shaking as I opened the attachment. The words seemed to blur together at first, but then the conclusion became crystal clear. Probability of paternity, 0%. I had to leave work early. I told my boss I was sick, which wasn't technically a lie. I felt like I was going to throw up. I sat in my car in the company parking lot for almost an hour just staring at those results on my phone screen. When I finally got home, Melissa was in the kitchen starting dinner preparations. Connor was at soccer practice and wouldn't be home for another 2 hours. It was just the two of us, and I knew I had to confront her. "We need to talk," I said, and something in my voice must have given away the seriousness of the situation, because she immediately stopped what she was doing and turned to face me. I showed her the test results on my phone. The color drained from her face instantly, and I knew before she even said a word that she had been living with this secret for Connor's entire life. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her hands shaking. "Since before he was born," she admitted. "I knew there was a chance. A chance." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You knew there was a chance that the child I've been raising for 10 years wasn't mine, and you never said anything." The whole story came pouring out then. 3 months before our wedding, she'd had a brief affair with her ex-boyfriend from high school, Trevor Manning. They'd run into each other at a bar when she was out with her girlfriends for her bachelorette party. One thing led to another, and they ended up sleeping together. She said it was a mistake, that it meant nothing, but when she realized she was pregnant a few weeks later, she wasn't sure who the father was. "I convinced myself it was yours," she said through tears. "The timing was close enough, and I wanted it to be yours so badly. When Connor was born and I saw those green eyes, Trevor has green eyes, I knew the truth, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy our family. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. So you've been lying to me for over 10 years. You've let me believe Connor was my biological son, let me form this incredible bond with him, knowing that it was all built on a lie. You are his father," she insisted. "Biology doesn't change the fact that you raised him. You're the only dad he's ever known." She was right about that, and it made everything so much more complicated. I loved Connor, that hadn't changed with the DNA results, but the betrayal from Melissa was overwhelming. The fact that she'd kept this secret for so long, that she'd watched me struggle with doubts and never put me out of my misery, was something I didn't know if I could forgive. Over the next few weeks we talked about it endlessly. Melissa begged for forgiveness, said she'd been a coward, but that she'd only kept quiet to protect our family. She suggested we go to counseling, that we could work through this. But every time I looked at her, all I could think about was the lie she'd been living for a decade. The hardest part was deciding what to do about Connor. He had no idea any of this was happening. To him, we were still the happy family we'd always been. How do you tell a 10-year-old boy that his entire life has been built on a deception? How do you explain that the man he calls dad isn't his biological father, but the man he's never met is? Connor's graduation from 5th grade was scheduled for the first week of June. It was going to be a big celebration. Both sets of grandparents were coming to town, and we'd planned a party at our house afterward. Melissa kept pushing for us to present a united front, to wait until after the graduation to figure things out. She didn't want to ruin Connor's big day, but something inside me had hardened. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became, not just about the initial deception but about the continued lies. Even now, knowing that I knew the truth, she was asking me to keep lying, to smile and play the happy family while our entire foundation was crumbling. I made a decision that I'm still not sure was right, but it felt like the only way to finally be free of the lies. The night before Connor's graduation, I set up a small recording device in our bedroom. I'd been documenting our conversations about the paternity situation, partly for potential legal reasons if we ended up divorcing, but also because I needed proof of her admissions. That final night, I got her to repeat the whole story one more time, including the part where she admitted she'd known the truth since Connor was born. The graduation ceremony was beautiful. Connor looked so proud in his little cap and gown, and seeing him walk across that stage to get his certificate made my heart ache. Whatever else was true, I was proud of the boy I'd helped raise. The love I felt for him was real, even if our biological connection wasn't. After the ceremony, we all gathered at our house for the celebration. About 30 people were there: family, friends, neighbors. Connor was the center of attention, as he should have been. But I could see Melissa watching me nervously, probably wondering what I was planning to do. During the toasts, after Connor's grandfathers had spoken and a few family friends had shared their congratulations, I stood up with my phone in my hand. I'd connected it to our Bluetooth speaker system earlier, ostensibly to play music during the party. "I have something I'd like to share as well," I announced. The room went quiet, everyone expecting another heartfelt father-son speech. Instead, I played the recording. Melissa's voice filled the room, clear as day. "I knew there was a chance he wasn't yours since before he was born. When Connor was born and I saw those green eyes, Trevor has green eyes, I knew the truth, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy our family." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop. I watched as the realization hit everyone in the room at the same time. Connor's face went from confusion to horror as he began to understand what he was hearing. Melissa's mother was the first to speak. "What is this?" she demanded, looking between Melissa and me. "It's the truth," I said simply. "Something Connor and everyone else in this family deserved to know." The party fell apart after that. People didn't know what to say or do. Connor ran to his room in tears, and Melissa followed him, shooting me a look of pure hatred as she passed. The grandparents were asking questions. Friends were making awkward excuses to leave early, and I just stood there in the middle of it all, feeling simultaneously vindicated and completely empty. I know what I did was brutal. I know it probably traumatized Connor, and that's something I'll have to live with forever. But after 10 years of lies, I couldn't pretend anymore. The truth had to come out, and maybe it was better that everyone heard it at once rather than having it leak out slowly over time. Melissa and I are divorced now. The proceedings were ugly, but the recording I'd made proved that she'd committed paternity fraud, which helped my case significantly. I didn't ask for alimony, and I didn't try to get out of child support. Whatever else had happened, Connor was still the boy I'd raised, and he deserved my continued support. The relationship between Connor and me is complicated now. He's angry, which I understand. He feels like his whole life was a lie, and in some ways it was, but we're working on it. He's in therapy, and so am I. We have supervised visits twice a week, and slowly we're rebuilding something. It's not the same as it was before. How could it be? But maybe it's more honest now. Maybe that's worth something. Trevor, Connor's biological father, has reached out through lawyers about establishing contact. That's Connor's decision to make when he's older, but for now we're taking things one day at a time. Some people think what I did at the graduation party was unforgivable. They say I should have handled it privately, that I was cruel to embarrass Melissa like that in front of everyone. Maybe they're right, but after 10 years of private lies, I needed the truth to be public. I needed everyone who'd been unknowingly complicit in the deception to understand what had really been happening. The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just burns everything down, but maybe sometimes that's what needs to happen before you can build something real again. Connor still calls me Dad, and despite everything that's happened, despite all the pain and betrayal and confusion, that still means everything to me.